Today, we're exploring the intersection of genetics and environmental health. Our guest specializes in how estrogen mimicking chemicals in our everyday environment can disrupt the body and impact long term wellness. We'll be diving into why we're seeing rising health issues like obesity, infertility, depression, cancer, even the feminization of males, as well as what you can do about it. This is the story of estrogenics with Dr. Anthony J. Dr. J, and I believe it's estrogenic, right?
Yeah, estrogenic chemicals. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Did you
my
coin that term?
uh my book is called Estrogeneration.
Right.
It's about like the generational impacts of these estrogens and how they get passed on. But estrogenics, I don't know if I coined it or not. I mean, maybe I was involved a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I love the name of the book, and the book obviously, you put it out some years ago. But it's more timely than ever right now, right? It's
Oh
like
yeah.
these problems continue to get worse.
Yep.
Things like low T and hormone disruption and all these things are seem prevalent. I mean, much,
Yeah.
much more than ever. So I want to learn about what even guided you to this, because obviously you came in before this was such a big issue, but perhaps it already you saw the smoke, happening. So tell us about the story that led you into studying this.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest motivator is always kids, right? I've got kids, and whenever you start having kids, you start paying more attention to these things. But even before that, I was researching hormones for a lot of years. It was on my radar. Uh, when I lived in Florida, we had somebody from the municipal water company come in, or the city water, and they
Yeah.
told us that Florida's kind of at sea level, so they recycle a lot of the water, so the birth control ends up in the water supply. And it was like a mind blowing moment for me because I had no idea. And that's the
Yeah.
last thing I wanted in college, to be drinking
Right.
birth control water. So they recommended we filter our water. And of course I did. But then throughout a lot of years of paying close attention, I realized like even the plastics have basically plastics. Did you know plastics were invented as birth control?
No way.
Like BPA was invented by a scientist named Charles Edward Dodds. It was like in the 1930s. Charles Edward Dodds, DODDS.
Hmm.
He started with a chemical called diethylstilbestrol, DES. And if you Google like DES babies and things, DES, DES, you'll find a lot of problems, like a lot of birth defects and things from this drug. They made a drug called diethylstilbestrol, DES. Doctors prescribed it until the 1970s. It was literally a drug they prescribed for like 50 years and causes birth defects, mimics estrogen in weird ways. They took it, the doctors would give it to women for morning sickness. So it's very common, surprisingly common, and so were the side effects from this stuff. But the BPA was developed from DES. They took DES and modified it a little bit and made BPA. It was intended to be a birth control, but they discovered it forms plastic, and then the races were on because they thought, oh, this is a lot more money to be made with the plastics.
Yeah.
And then historically, what they did is they convinced everybody it was safe. They did a whole bunch of marketing to convince people it does not leach. I mean, you probably remember back in the day, they used to tell people it does not leach into your water.
Yeah.
And I was used to be doing the research and saying, like, look, it leaches. I can tell it leaches. As the technology got better, we were able to measure nanograms because nanograms is a super, super tiny quantity. And so maybe initially they were being honest and they honestly didn't think it leached because you couldn't measure such a tiny quantity. But I think there was a lot of dishonesty there because,
Yeah.
if you can measure estrogen, you can measure BPA,
Yeah.
and we've been measuring estrogen way before, like in the 70s and 40s and 50s. But like if you look at the units for measuring estrogen, it's nanograms per deciliter. You know what I mean? And testosterone, you can measure these hormones in nanograms. That's the units you should be using.
Yeah.
Um, so we've been able to measure these things for a long time, but of course the technology has gotten better and we have had a lot more recognition like, oh, there is a lot of leaching. And yeah, it does act like birth control in your body in weird ways and it's not very natural. And you know, you don't want to take birth control without consent. You don't want to be
Of
accidentally
course.
ingesting birth control as a population, period.
You don't. And the crazy thing is I feel like a lot of people like, so what? Like it's just a little birth control I'm taking
Yeah.
every day.
Well, until you find out one of the common side effects of birth control is obesity, like weight
Yeah.
gain. And of course, if you're disrupting your hormones. That's a very common problem. They did a study with rats, super interesting. Um, I talk about this in my book. They had two groups of rats, same exact calories. The reason you do these studies with animals is because if you do them with humans, they cheat on their diet and it's midnight and
Yep.
they're drinking beer and eating pizza and they say they didn't do that. But they had two groups of rats, exact same calories. But one of the groups, they put low dose atrazine in their drinking water. And atrazine is just a herbicide. It mimics estrogen exactly the same as BPA. But they emphasized it was low dose. They didn't want to they don't want toxic levels. They didn't want to poison these
Right.
rats. And that group of rats got fat and the other group was lean.
Hmm.
Same exact calories. This whole nonsense about counting calories and it's your fault because you didn't count calories and you're eating too many calories. If your hormones are disrupted, you can absolutely gain a whole bunch of excess weight with the same calories everybody else is eating when they're losing weight. Very
Yeah.
important.
And that's why the reduction is kind of just looking at a singular element like a caloric intake and saying it's all the same totally misses the understanding of the human body and how complex and interrelated
Exactly.
it is. And one of the things I found really fascinating about your book, I mean, there's so many little tidbits in there that kind of make your eyes open and go, oh, wow. But I think just the understanding also of the scientific field and industry and how you get to studies and how they get funded, right? And how
Oh yeah.
people really
Yep.
are inclined to produce things that are of a certain result and then get more funding and have to keep
Yep.
doing that. Like
Yep.
it's very captured, right? You didn't
Yep.
have that when you went to school because you were funded privately, but most is not.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and I wrote about it in 2017. I'm glad you read the book and I'm glad you noticed that. My editors, when I was writing that book, they told me to take that chapter out
I'm sure they
because
did.
it's not really related to estrogen. It's just corruption, but it's kind of
Yeah.
a hobby of mine, right? This whole idea that there's corruption in medicine, it's always been on my radar because that's always been interesting to me because my dad is a medical doctor, my brother's an orthopedic surgeon. I'm in the medical field. Now I do genetic analysis mainly, but I'm still in the field. And it's just interesting. And it's, of course, big pharma is at the root of it because they make billions and billions and billions of dollars. So they have a ton of influence. And then I do a YouTube video or something, and sometimes they'll demonetize. I used to
Yeah.
get demonetized. They don't do this anymore, which is interesting. But if I mentioned testosterone, they would pull the funding on my YouTube videos, like completely
Wow.
demonetized. This is before COVID and before Twitter was purchased and stuff.
Yeah.
Before Twitter was purchased, they were getting
Oh,
crazy with the censorship. It was getting
it was
ridiculous.
awful. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember those days. You couldn't mention certain words, even immune system or herd, like those would
yeah,
trigger it. It was
yeah, man.
pretty wild.
Yeah, and people don't know that because they pull those videos. Like I did a whole bunch of videos that were completely deleted, and then people are like, "Hey,
Yeah.
like, why weren't you speaking up and stuff?" It's like, well, hey, I was, but I got my videos yanked,
Right.
and it's not very motivating to do more videos when they're pulling the plug on your videos occasionally, right? But
It feels very scary in a sense when they're like, three strikes and you're out. It's kind of like this punishment of,
yeah,
something that
yeah,
you don't want to go through, but you also want to put out the truth. So you're in a
yeah,
very tough situation when that comes. So I totally get that.
yeah. But the corruption, what happens, and a lot of people don't know, is with medical research, you choose peer reviewers. Like there's peer reviewed
Yeah.
studies.
Yep.
You
Yep.
actually
The gold
choose your
standard.
own. Yeah, that's the gold standard. It's supposed to be amazing and it helps. It's better than nothing, but you actually choose your own peer reviewers, which is absurd, right?
It's
Because
sick.
what you do is you just choose your buddies.
Yeah.
Like if I want to publish a study that says BPA is good for you, I can find a couple of guys with PhD. As long as they have a PhD or an MD, I can pull the strings and get those published, get those studies published. I wouldn't. I don't have that kind of ethic, but some people do.
Yeah.
Some people are so willing to do anything for their career. They don't care. They think it's just a big game. They don't have ethics. They think if it's legal, let's do it. And that's not my mentality, never has been. And I like to shine light on that kind of thing because it exists and it allows for a lot of shenanigans when it comes to topics like soy is a big one because soy makes a lot of money for a lot of people in these processed foods. Atrazine and herbicides are a big one. Sunscreen chemicals are a big one. Red
Hmm.
food dye. When I wrote about artificial red food coloring, I was the only one. Like nobody was
Yeah.
talking about it. Now it's basically becoming illegal. It was illegal in a few countries back when I wrote my book, But America, they never talked about it, you know. But
That's a
America is
big
the
thing you
worst.
learn, right? In reading this, you're like, wait, Europe's banned this for how
Yep.
long? And
Yep.
America, they're totally fine with it. You know, and you
Exactly.
like, and you keep seeing that over and over. Like America's
Yep.
like, whatever, just take a little. Where
Exactly.
Europe's like, nope, none allowed here. And
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
a huge, huge differential. I do think that's where you get this sort of Italian paradox of, oh, we eat gluten in Italy and feel fine, but we come here and eat and we're
Yep.
terribly sick.
Exactly. And again, like, you know, that was one of the things I tried to do in my book was to show like the contrast between America and Europe because there's so much contrast. Even China has stricter regulations than America on a lot of these estrogen mimicking chemicals, like the methylparaben and stuff, these parabens that are
Hmm.
found in personal care products. They're found in foods, by the way. If you go to your grocery store and you look at the corn tortillas, look at the label. You'll find
Yeah.
methylparaben, propylparaben, butylparaben. Just look for the word paraben, P-A-R-E or P-A-R-A-B-E-N, parabens, right? Like you've heard
Yeah.
about this in cosmetics,
Sure.
but most people like those are just crazy long words. There's so many crazy long words on these food ingredients. People just block them out. They just think like, I don't know what to do. Just throw their hands up. Well, just keep in mind that chemical is regulated in China stricter than America. Like they do not allow methylparaben. So you know it's bad when America's worse than China with their regulations. I mean, if you go over there and you look at the rivers and the pollution and stuff, it's horrible, right? So
Oh, and it's this great misnomer that America has the highest standards, right? The
yeah,
strictest or is the safest, right? We have so many government or organizations overseeing this. It's got to be. And that's where a lot of people land when I say, hey, you really shouldn't be using that sunscreen. It's like, come on, if it were bad for us, they would already know this and they wouldn't allow it on the market. And it's
right,
like,
right.
okay, if you think that
It's
way.
not true. Well, you know, CNN, right? Um, they published, and people can look it up. This was after I published my book. Unfortunately, I wish this study would have come out before I published my book. But so I published my book talking about how bad oxybenzone is.
Mm,
Oxybenzone, especially when I published my book, it was literally every sunscreen. You
yes,
go to Walmart and you look at like 20 brands, and every one of them had oxybenzone.
right.
And at that time, it was illegal in Japan, I think, and it was illegal in Australia because it was killing coral reefs. It
Coral
makes
reefs.
yeah,
Yeah.
it makes them infertile, just like it makes people infertile.
Yeah.
But it's worse in the water because these animals living in the aquatics, oceans and stuff, they're soaking in it all the time, so it's worse. But the point is, oxybenzone was everywhere. Right after I published my book, and I talk about how bad it is in my book, right? And all that
Hmm.
stuff is still valid, it's still important. But after I published my book, they did a study, and again, CNN picked it up if you want like the simplified layperson version. And they showed that one application of sunscreen, just one application, 7 days later, the blood levels of oxybenzone in people were above the government safety limits for cancer. 7 days later. And we're talking about like that's extreme hormone disruption. You know, there's a reason breast cancer has increased 250% since 1980. And there's a reason testosterone has pretty much dropped 250% in the inverse for men. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's not just a men's problem. It's not just a women's problem. There's a merge there because women don't want breast cancer. They don't want polycystic ovarian syndrome. Men don't want low testosterone, low muscle mass, and depression. And not to mention, you know, smaller sex organs and all this kind of stuff, because all of that happens with these these estrogen mimicking chemicals.
Yeah, it's why I feel sunscreen because it's the one thing you're brought into to fear the sun, and this one thing that's supposed to protect you is doing the opposite,
Yeah,
basically.
putting
And it's
chemicals on.
doing it in a way, and I think you brought this in the book where the UV light actually makes it worse. So you're
Yep.
going out, you're putting this on, and explain that because you know the
Yeah.
technicalities of it, but how does that work?
Yeah, good call. It's been a long time since anybody's asked me about that. It's because your estrogen receptor. So first of all, you can have things floating around your blood, but they don't really do anything until they stick to a receptor.
Right.
And the problem with some of these UV chemicals, these sunscreen chemicals, is they can fuse to the receptor.
Hmm.
It's called constitutively active. They can make the receptor activated. It's kind of like flipping your light switch on, but then putting a piece of duct tape over the light switch so you can't turn it off. Like the UV light can fuse these chemicals directly to the estrogen receptor. So as long as that estrogen receptor is still in your body, it stays on the flipped on position. And so it's extra hardcore mimicking, right? It's extra on. Because again, like receptors, a lot of times normal natural estrogen, it's going to stick to the receptor and then it's going to go off. So it causes a little bit of an effect and then it goes off. It's not just stuck on there permanently. That would be absurd. That's what happens sometimes with these constitutively active receptors. They get fused, they get ultraviolet fuses it on there. So it's a bigger effect. The other problem is they end up lowering testosterone. But not only that, they stick to the testosterone receptors and block binding. So then you don't get any effect from testosterone because it's almost like you got the light switch duct taped in the off position for testosterone because they're blocking those receptors. The analogy I sometimes use is if you played hockey, because it's hockey, it's like the playoffs right now, and I'm from Minnesota originally. But if you have a hockey goalie and if you put a big piece of plywood in front of the goal, no matter how many pucks you got on the ice, no matter how many players, how many shots on net, you're not scoring any goals, right? If you got a piece of plywood in front of your goal, if you've got something stuck to your testosterone receptor, you're not getting any effect from it. So you can have good testosterone and still have feminization and the symptoms of low testosterone, which would be like low muscle mass. Like I said, male feminization, depression a lot of times. I've seen so many men that boost their testosterone, their depression goes away.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like super good for your mental health, anxiety. It's very good for protecting against anxiety, bone density, on and on and on. I mean, testosterone, very important. It gets kind of ignored by the medical system. Like if you don't ask for a testosterone blood test, your doctor's not going to do it. I
They
guarantee
wouldn't
you.
do it, right?
And they
And
won't
then,
even
like
do
you
it when you
said, the
ask.
ranges are wild now, right? It's so
Yeah, they're
little to a
ridiculous.
lot like
Exactly. It's a joke. I mean, frankly,
yeah,
just like the thyroid hormone ranges are a joke and the vitamin D ranges are a joke. Mayo Clinic just lowered their range again for that one. The blood
yeah,
sugar ranges. These ranges, they're normal ranges based on normal Americans, and normal Americans are becoming less and less healthy. So they just keep normalizing that. But it's also because they don't have any drugs. Like they don't have any pharma products for testosterone. Like they've got a ton for cholesterol. They're
yeah,
obsessed with people's cholesterol because they have tons of drugs that makes tons of money. Statins make over $20 billion per year with cholesterol lowering medication, statins, 20
yeah,
bill. Uh, Testosterone, zero. Like they don't have any drugs, so they don't make any money, so they don't care. They don't even want you paying attention to it because oftentimes it gets people off the drugs because if you
hmm,
get your testosterone up, whether it's from testosterone cream or just naturally getting healthier and weightlifting and exercising, which is the best start. That's what everybody should be doing to try and get their testosterone up. But if you get your testosterone up, oftentimes you get off your prescription drugs. Your blood pressure problems go away. Your depression goes away. So you don't need the SSRIs and the Zoloft and the Lexapro and all that stuff. So oftentimes the drug companies lose money by helping people boost their testosterone. They hate that. They're not going to admit
yeah.
that, but they hate that.
And I don't know if you saw this video of some prominent cardiologists going on saying how every one of his friends' cardiology are all on statins, even though they show no like ill adverse need for it.
Oh
And it's
yeah,
this preventive protective measure of sorts to jump on these drugs.
they drank the
Um,
Kool-Aid. Yeah, they drank the
Yeah,
Kool-Aid.
no, they drink it heavy and kind of ridicule you to think otherwise. And then you wonder, why so many people are in this state where you could see it clearly that low T hormonal dysregulation is such a part of it. And talk about that relation of cholesterol to testosterone hormones
Yeah,
in
man,
general, because a lot of people
for
miss that.
sure.
And, you demonize cholesterol, but it's absolutely essential for the steroid hormones.
Exactly. Most people don't know that. Can I share my screen? Are people going to be able to watch this too on
Yeah,
video?
yeah, yeah. As long as we talk it through, they'll listen,
I'll
they'll
talk it
watch.
through.
So we'll
Yeah.
we'll do both. Yeah.
Can you see this already?
Yep. Yep. Scientific
This,
report. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So this is the medical journal nature.com, one of the most prestigious medical journals, science journals. This is a scientific study with 12 million people. All right. This is the gold standard study of all time on the topic of cholesterol. And this gives people an actual number to look at when they look at their blood work at home, which I recommend. They're looking at total cholesterol and all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality just means death. They don't want to say the word death, but that's what they're saying. They're saying, hey, what's
A
your
nice
cholesterol? What's
way
your
of
risk of dying?
saying death. Yeah.
Yep. And it could be heart attacks, but it could be strokes, it could be cancer, it could be whatever, right? But heart attacks, 1 in every 3 Americans has heart disease and dies of heart disease. So this is the most influential part of it is heart disease. Now here's a summary graph of what they found, and it includes men and women. They have what's called a hazard ratio, which I'll talk about in a second, and then it's looking at total cholesterol. Now
Hmm.
hazard ratio just means hazard of dying. Like you don't want a high hazard ratio. That means you have a high risk of death. Could be cancer, could be strokes, could be heart attacks. You don't want that number to be high. And what you'll notice up in the graph, and I'll explain it for people that can't see it, if you get above 200 on your total cholesterol, that's amazing. That's perfect. That's the lowest risk of death. Up until about 280. Honestly, the optimal range, and this is based on this study and other studies like it, but it's 180 to 280. Your cholesterol should be between 180 and 280. And that's pretty much what the normal range used to be when they first invented these studies. They've lowered the range to sell more statins, but that's where you should be. And yeah, if you're getting above 300, you got to look at people's nuanced situations. Maybe they're eating keto and tons of fats and stuff, and that raises your
Yeah.
cholesterol. And that's normal if you're eating keto. But it's again, there's some unique stuff. If you start getting really, really high, you got to start really paying attention. But the craziest thing about this graph, and you can already see it, Caspar, 110 to 120. If you have super low cholesterol, it doubles your risk of death. It's a twofold higher hazard of all cause mortality. It doubles your risk of dying if you have a low cholesterol. The real risk with cholesterol for your health is low cholesterol. That's the real problem. And number one, it just, you can see it in these studies because it increases your risk of dying. Number two, it makes your hormones. Cholesterol is the building block for your testosterone and your estrogen and your progesterone. They literally call those sex hormones. The definition of a sex hormone is a hormone that's built from cholesterol. That's the definition. And by the way, vitamin D, technically a sex hormone.
Yeah.
Vitamin D is made from cholesterol also.
Yeah.
Um,
And look at those levels in us too, right?
yeah,
So
those are
low.
dropping too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Super important.
It really feels like this whole thing is this vicious disease cycle, right? It's because you even talked about this is like do you have diabetes and have obesity, or is obesity to cause the diabetes that's triggering low testosterone or low estrogen, and it keeps going, right? And
Yeah.
so and then
Yeah.
you have this constant poisoning of these estrogenics that we don't even know about, right? Because you have a top 10 list, you call it IRS, not the famed government that everyone loves organization. This is
Right.
ill reproductive system. And you just go through these 10 and it's like they're everywhere, right?
Yep. Yep.
And
Daily.
so
Daily. Yep.
yeah, and so it seems so interrelated that these things that we're ingesting are causing so many of the problems from depression and everything. Do you see is there like one thing that sticks out to you a little bit more, or is it truly just this combination of all of it?
No, there's two things that stick out more than everything.
Yeah.
Drinking water, like people need to filter their drinking water because they're doing that every day. There's so much plastic piping coming into your house that's pulling in
Mm-hmm.
microplastics and phthalates and BPAs. And by the way, BPA free means nothing. Like it's
Nothing.
still got
Right?
BPS, it's still got
Right.
BPF, it's still got phthalates. If it says BPA free, I'd be extra worried about it, to be honest, because who knows? But unless it's glass, if it's glass, if it's stainless steel, amazing, no problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
But filter your water. That's number one. Absolutely for sure. No compromises there. You got to filter it. If you're traveling and you're at the airport once a year and you're drinking out of plastic, no big deal. Cheat once in a while, very occasionally, but by all means, on the daily, filter your water. You got to do. The other one is fragrances. People have got to
Mm.
start paying attention to the fragrances because there's so many hidden estrogen mimicking chemicals, and it's kind of perverse because you're attracted to them a little bit. Like, you know, that
Oh,
new car smell? That's
yeah.
estrogen. That's a
Oh,
fake estrogen smell. That's not natural estrogen. That's actually estrogen mimicking chemicals. So your
yeah.
brain kind of likes that, right? Like people like that stuff. And so they put them in fragrances. It's like a way to trick your physiology. You can trick your brain. It's kind of like pheromones, you know?
Right.
And so these companies take advantage of your brain, just like the Dorito company takes advantage of your opioid receptors by
Mhm.
putting extra gluteomorphines and casomorphines and all kinds of food chemicals to trigger your brain for addictive properties. These chemical companies, with the fragrances, they're tricking your brain into thinking it's attractive. It's bad for your health. It's not worth it. Most people don't realize that. They're using perfumes in their deodorant, in their soap, in their shampoo, in their car with those little Christmas tree looking things.
Oh, can't
It's
stand them.
bad. It's
Yeah.
gross. Yeah.
Yeah. I am convinced that Uber has to have an option where you can have one without the Christmas
That's
tree
awesome.
scented
That's
thing,
awesome.
right? That's poisoning you. I would literally pay extra. I don't know why they don't do it.
Awesome.
But I mean, I agree with you 100% that I think one of the biggest is the tap water. It's just, it's the atrazine and E2. I feel like that's just so common in that gets to
Hmm.
us. And do you feel that even with a filter that the showering, bathing, washing things and in as far as dishes, even everything, do you feel we need to go beyond that and actually filter a whole house or try and
Sometimes
find ways around that too?
I don't anymore. I used to when I had little kids. My
Yeah.
kids are older, so they're not sitting in the tub drinking the water and stuff, but it does absorb through your skin. I mean, I take a shower, I don't filter my whole house. I would recommend people go to ewg.org and look
Hmm.
at their tap water database. EWG, three letters, EWG.
Yep.
Environmental Working Group. They they have this awesome database where you can literally put in your zip code and it'll tell you the chemicals that are in your water that are above the government safety limits. And if you search those chemicals and they go through your skin, then you probably should put, and you have like a crazy high dose, like in Rochester, Minnesota, where I used to live, because I worked at the Mayo Clinic. They had a whole bunch. I mean, they used to be factories, and that they used to have factories in the city, and they have this lake called Silver Lake, which isn't silver at all. It's like a big mud hole, and it's full. Probably, I guarantee you, it's full of residual chemicals and stuff because the drinking water has a bunch of chemicals. Something like that. And like for example, when I was at Mayo Clinic, they had a scientist come in from South America somewhere. I can't remember the specific country, and immediately broke out with like skin, like eczema and hives and all these
Oh,
skin problems. And I told her like, get a whole like filter your shower water. At
yeah.
least get a shower head filter. She started doing that. Boom, her skin cleared up right away. She
Wow.
wasn't used to having chemicals just being like drenching on her body all day long. And of course, there's always gut bacteria problems and gut issues related to eczema too and inflammation there. But mainly for her, I didn't want to get into all that. I just told her to filter the water coming into her house, and it fixed it in that case. So it's clearly an influence. Um, so it's something to think about. It's not something that you need to worry as much. I think the drinking is the bigger problem across the
Yeah.
population. But if you happen to live in a city with crazy high, chemicals, by all means, you got to do it. You got to either got to move or you got to filter your whole house sometimes.
Yeah, and again, the alternative that so many people turn to, I see, is that okay, we stop drinking the tap water, we're drinking the Dasani,
Plastic.
right,
Yeah,
out of
yeah, yeah,
plastic,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is I don't know, is that even a step at all above tap water? I would imagine it is somewhat,
yeah.
but you're still, especially when you think about how far that Dasani and Poland Spring went in that cheap plastic, which was probably chilled, warmed, chilled, right? And it's
Hmm.
that really gets the leaching into it that people just assume is fine, but it's
Yep,
absolutely not, right? That's what you wrote about.
correct. Yeah, I mean, the problem is our ancestors for thousands of years were never exposed to these chemicals. So your genetics are not well suited for them. Your body does not metabolize them. I mean, like there's certain things in our environment like cyanide or something. Like apple seeds have cyanide.
Hmm.
I'm not saying people should go out and eat a ton of apple seeds, but if you eat an apple seed occasionally, like it slips through and you're eating apples, not that big of a deal. Your body handles it pretty well because your ancestors had that occasionally, those exposures. You can handle it. But yeah, these plastics, they're extra ultra sneaky because they're not toxic. They don't kill you. So people think it's okay because they're not dying and they don't have really obvious side effects. Like they don't give you headaches, they don't make you feel uncomfortable. They just mess up your hormones and it takes years to see the results, and then all of a sudden you're infertile and you're depressed and you're overweight, and it's a slow process. And then it's like, well, how do you reverse that? That's a grind. That's a slow
Yeah.
process. And then reversing, it's better just to not have those problems to begin with.
Well, it's the slow boil to where it's
Mm-hmm.
like actually so you don't feel it, and then it's the slow cooling too. Even if you take the actions, it does take time. And
Yep.
one of the
Good point.
scarier things that you talked about was the epigenetic reprogramming with estrogen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's
Yep.
kind of, a wild part of it is that okay, I ingested this, I'm going to change, But is it even too late? Because you're seeing in some of these studies that this is being passed down with even short-term exposure to generations beyond.
Correct.
Second, I think third generation is even sometimes worse off from it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's never too late to change. At least everything you do helps a little bit, right? Or maybe a
Sure.
lot, depending. But I did a talk for the Weston A. Price Foundation. They're a big advocacy group for raw
Love
milk and
them.
stuff. They're the reason raw milk is legal in most states. It used to be illegal in all the states except one, and now it's legal in all the states except one. But I was giving a talk for Weston A. Price, and I was talking about epigenetics because they're inherited. You know, most people don't realize epigenetics, the definition of epigenetics is something that has to be inherited.
Mhm.
People think of it as like just genes turning on and off. It's actually marks on your DNA that are physically passed on. So you can't see it with DNA sequencing. You can do epigenetic sequencing, which is real expensive. I used to do it at Mayo Clinic all the time. We'd call it like next generation sequencing and stuff. But and you can do all kinds of different epigenetic sequencing. I'm not going to get into the weeds on it, but you can do it. It's expensive. But what's interesting is the analogy I usually use to describe it is musical notes, right? Because if you have a melody, everybody understands like da, 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 like Mary Had a Little Lamb or whatever. I can
Mhm.
give you those notes. You can play that on piano, no problem. You can give it to somebody else. They can play. That's your DNA. That's like the bass line. That's like the
Mhm.
melody. But as soon as you put extra notes on top of that, that's the epigenetics. There's more notes there. There's more complexity there. It dictates a lot. Like it sounds totally different if you have different chords and different notes on top of your melody, right? That's the epigenetics. And the funny thing, the reason I bring up Weston A. Price is they're kind of like a strict group, and I really like them. And um, in fact, sure, it's pretty funny. I can get it off my wall here. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
This is the Integrity in Science Award they gave me.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you can see it, but this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
from
yeah.
the Weston A. Price. But but it's funny because I used a Willie Nelson song as like my analogy or something. It was about smoking weed because cannabis can act like estrogen too, right?
That's right.
It's one of the problems with cannabis with reproduction and fertility. And so I was using like this Willie Nelson melody song or something to kind of show like to explain epigenetics. And of course, these people are like, what is
They're
going
all
on?
freaking out in the back, right? Like, you can't say that.
Yeah, it's like a family friendly. And I wasn't like, I wasn't crossing any lines, but I was kind of smirking, like just sneaking in some Willie Nelson stuff at the Weston A. Price.
But that I mean, you bring up a good point with the cannabis as well. It's there are because a lot of people just link it to the artificial things we've created, right? And all of this. And but there are these phytoestrogens that
Yep. Yep.
include cannabis, right? And a few that I was a little bit like soy, we all sort of know that that's sort of talked about, even though
Yep.
some people still really enjoy, soy-based things. But I think the two that stuck out to me beyond the cannabis and soy are lavender and flax seeds, right?
Yep.
Talk
Yep.
about that.
Yeah, good point. First of all, everybody agrees that soy acts like estrogen. People just debate about whether it's good estrogen or bad estrogen. That's the real debate. In my opinion on all of this, whether it's soy, whether it's flax, which we'll talk about in a second,
Mhm.
all of this stuff, our culture is so saturated with estrogens as it is with these BPAs and these plastics and these fragrances and these sunscreens and these atrazine herbicides. I don't think we need more estrogen. You know what I mean? Like that's my philosophy. Even if it's supposedly good or whatever, that can be argued, and I can see both sides of that argument. And I'm kind of open-minded about that, to be totally honest. But I don't think we need more estrogen. Period. Like end of
Yeah.
discussion. It acts like estrogen, and we don't need more of that. If it was acting like testosterone, I'd be like, let's really figure this out. Let's see if this is good testosterone or bad testosterone. Um, Now the flax was interesting because they did a study with over 100 foods to look at the phytoestrogen, the plant estrogen
Mhm.
content, and all the foods were under 1,000 units except soy and flax. Soy and flax were over 100,000 units of estrogen. They're
Mhm.
super high. It's not even close, like the discussion. So they're like a whole different universe of quantity of estrogen compared to all the other plants. Now, the lavender is tricky because I thought, when I was publishing that book, I thought they were going to keep coming out with studies and clarify this, and they really haven't. It's been super quiet. So honestly, I'm more skeptical. Like it was definitely argued in a bunch of scientific studies that lavender acts on your estrogen receptor, and I think it does.
Hmm.
But I was hoping to see like more studies. Like with the sunscreen, as soon as I published my book, there's like study after study and keeps validating, keeps getting more and more obvious and more clear. The lavender, it's just been dead and flat, and it's probably because there's no money to be made studying it.
Hmm.
There's two things with lavender that are complicated. Number one, the lavender products that they study are usually like cheap fragrances that are made in
Yeah.
China. And a lot of people have argued that it was just the chemical, the garbage that was alongside the lavender that was in that stuff. And that's a valid argument. I don't know. So I'm a
Yeah.
little bit more skeptical about lavender than I was when I published my book, to be totally honest. But I'm still a little bit nervous about it. I don't think people need lavender in their life. And yes, it
Hmm.
is anti-inflammatory, so it does have a positive aspect, but so is exercise, so is good sleep, so is eating healthy. Like
Right.
if you don't have inflammation, you don't need things that are anti-inflammatory. So I don't really use lavender personally, and I really want to see more studies, especially with like really purified lavender essential oil.
Yeah.
But I'm still nervous about it in that regard. But soy and flax for sure, there's no debate.
Yeah. And
Those.
it seems like a lot of these products, let's say lavender scents, right, in general, soy, alternative to milk and everything, are consumed in large amounts by women. Beauty products in general
Yep.
that
Yep.
have these phthalates and everything else, these are consumed by women. So it's a huge issue there, but it's also obviously influencing men with low T. I think one of the big things is, again, like you spoke about this earlier, when you have a child, that's, suddenly shifts everything for you. But we're making it now that it's so readily available and so normalized to either hit a vape pen as a kid. Like all of these things are around, or use scents and cosmetics earlier and earlier. Women are
Mm-hmm.
coming of age earlier because their hormones are off. And even the whole feminization. And I do want to bring that up a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
I see it as, and you brought this up in the book, as just a level of apathy that is truly just crushing a whole generation of like,
Yep.
what's it mean? Who cares? Like, oh, life, it sucks anyway. Let me just do
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? And it's like,
Yep.
why is this generation so screwed up? But then you could start to move back and say, well, it's actually because of some of this stuff. It's not just this laissez-faire attitude they have, but it's linked to scientific reasons, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's so frustrating. When I was writing my book, there was a lot more of this science confusion, like the scientific sexual confusion stuff. It's funny, it's finally kind of starting to clear up a little bit. Like it was getting ridiculous where there were scientists that were saying there's no difference between men and women. Like actual scientists at Harvard and places that you'd think like there's no way somebody's actually saying this.
Yeah.
And it's like, hang on, men don't have ovaries, women don't have testes. Like there's some super obvious differences. Like you're just straight lying if you say there's no difference. Like there's no ethical way to say that men and women are exactly the same. Uh, you can try and make some kind of philosophical argument or something. Even though I think those are nonsense too, but at least you maybe can jump through some logical hoops and do something like that. But with science, you can't pretend like men and women are exactly the same. I mean, it's just absurd, right?
Yeah.
But we were getting shut down for saying like obvious things like that, and you couldn't say feminization. But a bunch of scientific publications specifically talk about male feminization using that exact terminology with atrazine and some of these chemicals. um, so that's where I got it from. I wasn't making up terminology, I was just using the
Mhm.
science terminology, but it suddenly became like politically incorrect, and it was like a really hot button thing for a while. Again, it's finally, the smoke is blowing off of that
Yeah.
finally. But the point is, it happens, right? And it's because of the lower testosterone, I think. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. Generally, I mean, low testosterone is a form of feminization. If you have a man and you
Mhm.
lower his testosterone, you're heading in the direction of feminizing that man physically. Like it will change his brain, it'll change his muscle mass, it'll change a lot of things that are more feminine.
Yeah.
Bone structure changes. You
Hmm.
can take an ancient Egyptian out of a mummy and you can tell if it's a man or woman just looking at the facial bones,
Right.
like based on the feminization or the masculinization of the facial bone. There's so many aspects, like your brain functions differently. Men and women see color differently. We have a different number of we have the same number of rods and cones. Remember, rods are the things where you see the movement and cones are the
Right.
things you see the color. We have the
Right.
same number, but the actual connections to the rods and cones. Men have much more neural connections for rods, and women have more for cones. Women see color better than men. Men see movement better than women. There's like 1,000 things. If I sat down and talked about our hearing is different, our smell is different, our
Right.
ability to see things is different. Like women care so much about the stupid color on your wall compared to men. Men, it's just painted black. You know what I mean? I have
Right.
a friend. He runs a company down in Arkansas. His name is Robert Sykes. He wouldn't mind me talking about this. He painted all his walls black in his in his factory. It's called Keto Brick. It's phenomenal. It's awesome. I love it. I go down there like this is amazing. But women, they're not so big on that, right? They want
Yeah.
the teal, and it's not just called teal. It has to be called whatever, like ocean
Sea
blue.
mist, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But the point is, men and women are different. And everything that, like, if you took the rods and cones and you changed the amount of receptors, you could push that in the direction of feminization or masculinization. And that's just what it's going to be. It's scientifically called feminization or masculinization. These chemicals feminize men. Um, and it's additive. As you add more of them, you see more feminization. And again, in animal studies, you see it. I know you talked about apathy. That's a great example because in
Mhm.
animals, it's not just humans. It's like you could maybe see some bias with humans, but in animals, if you feminize them, you see a sexual apathy and stuff where they just don't care. They don't pursue females. Like you see it in their actual activities in rats and mice and rabbits and all kinds of things. So we know it's happening, and yeah, sometimes you can look at the brain structure, but brains are very hard to study, right? Because anytime you
Yeah.
start drilling into your brain or whatever, you're just disrupting the brain and the neurons, and scanning the brain is really difficult because you have to be sitting
Hmm.
still. I mean, there's so much complicated aspects to brain science and physiology, but it's feminization, period.
Yeah.
That's what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. And what it leads to in some ways, in the same respect of everything, this is the thing that scares me most, I think, out of all conditions and future of humanity is the infertility. Like I see
Mm-hmm.
this going into the children of men, that movie sort of state where it's very difficult to have a child. You could
Yeah.
address the depression with drugs. You could address cancer. I don't think there'll be enough IVF in the world at a certain point if this continues down this route that addresses it. I mean,
Yeah.
each of these things have each of the components you're talking about, estrogenics, has a direct relation to our reproductive system, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why we keep setting records in terms of infertility. And it's not just people that don't want to have kids. The records that we keep setting are people that are trying to have kids and
Yes.
and failing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a problem. I mean, basically, it's kind of like the Amish, where you don't see autism in the Amish.
Right.
Like, I think, those are the types of people that are going to save the culture. It's the people that are obsessed with keeping this stuff out of their homes. So I think individually, people just have to buckle down and do it. Like filter the drinking water, drink out of glass. Be a little bit Amish in
Yeah.
this regard. You don't have to be fully Amish. Like maybe you want to,
Right.
that's fine. But I'm not fully Amish by any means.
Yeah.
But I have electricity. But I guess I don't know. Maybe they have electricity too. But I've got a car. But the point is, like on some of these things, you have to be your own best advocate because the government is not that interested in them because there's not any money behind these things. In fact, it's the opposite. There is money in making prescription drugs and selling drugs for sick people. So if you get sicker, there's more incentive. So in reality, they're kind of incentivized. It's not intentional, probably. Maybe it is. They're incentivized to have sicker people, to have more plastics in your environment, to have less water filtration, and on and on and on.
Yeah. So
So,
let
yeah.
me ask you this. If you were someone and you had, let's say, let's start on the male side of it, low testosterone right now,
Hmm.
and you started taking the steps, which obviously take time, we said. You start moving away from plastics. And I've seen this with a lot of people, even in their younger years, want to have a family, start to realize there may be something there, low T infertility. So they start to take, all right, I'm cutting plastics out. I'm not going to use scents. The laundry is going to be unfragranced, laundry detergent. I will filter all my water and everything. Would you still recommend, testosterone replacement therapy, or like what would you recommend, and how would you recommend someone go about it?
Yep. first of all, check your testosterone. Most people don't. My favorite company is ownyourlabs.com, OWN,
Okay.
ownyourlabs.com. It's $30 to check your testosterone. You
Really?
don't have to go to the
Damn.
doctor.
Beverly Wells like a few hundred, I think, or like
Yeah,
about that.
exactly. Like Own Your Labs is the cheapest. I don't have any affiliation. I don't have any affiliation with anybody. I just recommend good companies when I see them, and that's a good one. Um, so number one, check your testosterone. Number two, if you are a man, you've got to be above 500. Like that's the cutoff. So let's say you're 400. They'll tell you that's normal. They say it's fine. It's not fine. At least make sure you're above 500. If you're already above 500, rock on. You're doing good. I mean, you could probably improve. It'd be nice to be at least 700, to be totally honest. Maybe even closer to 1,000. I had a guy recently. I was giving a talk in Toronto recently. His testosterone was 1,800, totally
Wow.
natural. That's the highest I've ever seen,
That's
by the way.
crazy.
He didn't even
Yeah.
know. He didn't even have a clue. Like that was really, really high. I
Wow.
mean, that's yeah.
Good for him.
I know, man. It's very impressive. And of course, he's eating healthy, he's exercising, whatever. But I mean, still. So the foundation is checking it. And then if it's low, be patient. Like you said, give it 6 months, give it a year. At least you're hoping to trend in the right direction. And then you can be a little more patient and keep trending in the right direction. But if it's just dead flat and you can't rescue your testosterone, I'm a big fan of testosterone replacement. Um, I'm also a fan of doing genetic consulting because I do genetic consulting.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I do it, is because it helps a lot of people figure out the real problems. Because sometimes you have like a genetic issue where you're not clearing heavy metals very well or whatever,
Mm,
whatever. There's so many potential genetic issues. Like if you have a lot of heavy metals, those lower testosterone, no matter how good your diet is, no matter how good your exercise is, those may have built up in your bones and they're slowly releasing into your system, and you're not going to know that unless you're looking at genetics, that is your unique hotspot to fix. And everybody's
hmm.
different. Like there's so many thousands of options and variables, so sometimes you just got to sit down and investigate what's under the hood.
Yeah.
But it starts by checking it, and then again maybe getting more specific to your situation, because you don't want to go on testosterone replacement unless you really need to.
Yeah.
But if you are below 500, you've done everything else correctly, you've looked at your genetics, you've optimized, take testosterone replacement if you can't get above 500. Absolutely. Even if you're 25 years old, that's my solution. Now, hopefully, you're not 25. Like usually you don't see lower testosterone. That's irreversible until you're older, but occasionally you do, right? There are occasions. I'm friends with a testosterone clinic doctor down in Miami, Florida. He used to have a policy where they wouldn't replace men's testosterone under age 50. They wouldn't even consider it. It was just too young.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's like 90% of his clients are under age 50. A lot of them
Hmm.
are in their 20s and 30s because, again, super common, super prevalent, harder and harder to reverse depending on what your parents gave you as you were growing up and what you were exposed to in the womb, and on and on and on. So it can be really frustrating for people. But again, like try everything natural first. Don't forget to weight lift. Don't forget to good sleep. Some people, they think they're going to get their testosterone up by just stopping drinking out of plastics. You got to do a little bit of everything if your testosterone is really low. You got to be firing on all cylinders.
Well, that's the thing. It definitely takes work and a self-analysis of where you are. It's like a lot of people I know, they could test and say they're low, and then you start to go and they're like, I don't know why I'm doing everything right. And it's like stress, 12 days, like 12 hours a day of work, just nonstop, not eating well, eating late at night, caffeine in the morning. Like, that's not doing well. You may think
Yeah.
that's normal in your world. But if
Yep.
you start to adjust that a little bit, you will see the downstream effects of it in regards to testosterone. And I mean, I just worry that a lot of people are now seeing this like online ability to just go online, chat with a doctor and be like, my levels are 300 or so, and just, okay, here's testosterone, while
Yep. That's a
not
problem.
changing any other aspect of their life and
I
just
know.
maxing out on testosterone year after year after year. Like, that's not a good approach either.
Correct. Especially like going back to the heavy metals example. Let's
Yeah.
imagine you built up a bunch of lead from lead paint in an apartment you didn't even know your parents had, and it's built up in your bones, right? And you've got really bad genetics for building up a bunch of extra lead. Let's say the lead is causing low testosterone, because it does. I mean, you can go to Google and say, does high lead lower testosterone? It's going to say absolutely, right? Mercury,
Right.
lead, cobalt, chromium, cadmium. Um, in fact, aluminum even lowers testosterone if you have high levels built up from aluminum foil and aluminum deodorant and all this
Yeah. Yep.
bioaccumulation. But the point is, let's imagine you took testosterone replacement, but you never fixed the lead problem. Well, now you're still going to have like neurological disorders and brain fog, and you're going to have fallout from the lead that you never addressed that was really the original cause of the low
Yeah.
testosterone. And that analogy could be used in a number of different scenarios without the heavy metals. You could talk about dairy sensitivities or nightshades or who knows, right? Everybody has so many different genes. So you really need to address the root cause. Otherwise, there's always some health ramification or some fallout from those unaddressed issues if you're just covering it up with testosterone.
And that's why I always say it's really important to have someone there that can guide you through that, such as yourself from the genetic side, a doctor that understands the labs better than some that would say, oh, 400, not a big deal. Just,
Right.
don't worry about it, right? And so
Mhm.
you do need support. You can't just try and figure it all out. Of course, you could start to do those things yourself. Sleep better, eat better, remove the plastics, filter water, and you should see improvement. But if you keep going, there's always, I think, a need to bring someone in on your team to help out with that and understand it better. But most
Mhm.
people will just go straight for the T or the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I want to ask you about this because I had some people reach out to me through IG. I posted this story and I had questions, and I did want to learn your thoughts because a lot of women I'm seeing this, they're trying to get pregnant, start to use testosterone pellets, right? Almost
Mhm.
indiscriminately, I would say. What are your thoughts on that, especially in the realm of a woman trying to get pregnant?
Yeah, it's the same problem as men, just indiscriminate. You have to look at the very specific situations. I got an email today. Let me see if I can find it really quick because it was so
Okay.
recent. It's going to be on the top of my list here. I'm on my computer on my other screen, but it
Yeah,
says, listen to this. I'm going to remove the name from this. I'm just going to read this
sure.
person's email. All right. Um, Thank you, and I hope you are well. All right. This is Dear Dr. J. Thank you. I hope you are well. Um, this consult purchase, somebody purchased a DNA
Hmm.
consult for their kid, is because of a happy update. After following your recommendations involving my Crohn's leaky gut genes, I'm feeling much better and got pregnant this time without even trying. A very different experience from the 2 year infertility I experienced with my first.
Hmm.
That's enough of the email, right? It goes on, but
Hmm.
pregnant without even trying, right? Because they fixed their gut issues, because who knows what genes they had. I don't even remember, right? It was a long time ago, obviously, because now they're having a kid and all this. So that was probably a consult I did a year, 2 years ago or something, right? I don't even remember the person, but
Hmm.
obviously they addressed a root cause issue that some people would have just tried to cover it up with some hormones. And, it's not the right approach, clearly, right?
No,
Um,
I've seen that in so many patients at our center before, where they come in for, let's say, some sort of dysfunction, neurological gut, Lyme disease, even whatever it is, and as they unravel things and start to get better, they suddenly become pregnant. Not as like it was
mhm.
not their intention at all, but they're
Yeah,
related. As you clean
yeah,
your environment, as things start to come back better, like that may happen, right? Even if you
yeah.
don't intend it that way. So I do feel like infertility is one of those things. Again, everyone wants to run to a quick solution. If I pop a pellet in me, testosterone, will that work, right? I mean, it
Mhm.
could help you, surely, but why? What's there that's causing this not to work right now? Rather than
Yep.
trying to add something into your body, maybe try to remove the things that are impeding your fertility.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of a big pharma based mentality, honestly. It's like, you got a problem, here's a pill.
Yeah.
They're just taking that approach and throwing it into the testosterone replacement field. And unfortunately, a lot of people make a lot of money prescribing testosterone and things because they upcharge it because, they can get away with that. They do the same thing with the thyroid. I was just looking at somebody who's charging like $10,000 a year for thyroid replacement. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, they're just giving people Armor Thyroid. And Armor Thyroid's almost as cheap as a multivitamin. And like, they're good at reading blood tests and stuff, but it's not $10,000 a year good.
No.
Like, they're taking advantage of the situation because the conventional doctors are usually so bad at, they don't pay attention to your thyroid. They don't pay attention to your sex hormones. They're so bad that people are jumping in and taking advantage of that situation and upcharging on that. So you got to be careful with that too, right? I mean, because there's corruption on both ends. But Yeah, but there's good doctors out there in all the aspects, of course. You just have to do a lot of extra research and take your, it's basically become like a burden for people. I always use the analogy like if you had a car problem and you took your car to your mechanic, but you had to know more about the car problem than your mechanic, it'd be like, what the hell am I paying for? Like, why am I here? Like, what's going on?
Right.
It's like that with these doctors. Like, you shouldn't have to go to the doctor knowing more about hormones and thyroid and stuff than the doctor. You should not have to do that. But they are not very well trained on the topic of hormones because they're
Yeah.
not drugs. So it's a frustrating situation. I get it. You have to
Yeah.
become a little bit of an expert, and that's just the way it is in our society.
You become an expert and you could rely, I think, or lean into things like you're putting in the book, right? Which aren't these take drugs sort of approach. It is sauna, fast, right? Do things of that nature. Look at how your food is packaged, right? Is everything truly in plastic? Which a lot of times it is. We may
Yep.
even think we're eating better because we end up at a Whole Foods and spend more on money on our food. But if it's all wrapped in plastic anyway and coming from all ends of the earth, that's not really the best approach either. And it could be a source of your dysfunction. So it's like stick to those things first before you jump to the drugs, right? There's a
For
lot you
sure.
can do just in the simplicity of things to get
Yep.
there. And
Yep.
you
Yeah. The
even give
principle.
like gold, silver, bronze plans, right? All of this, which
Oh
is
yeah.
great because some people aren't ready for the gold. It was a lot when I read. I was like, I'm almost there, but it's
Yeah. The
still a
shower
good
curtains and
amount of things you
plastic.
have to eliminate or add in there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the general principle is if your ancestors were not doing this for thousands of years, be a little extra skeptical, right? Like it doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, like to have a car or something like that. Your ancestors didn't have cars for thousands of years. It's not unhealthy to have a car, but be a little extra skeptical. Maybe you need to go extra, do walk a little bit
Yeah.
more because you have a car. Like there's things you might need to do, modifications because of these modern things. But that's a good way to think about it. Like be extra cautious. Like plastics are not a new thing. They're not an ancient thing
Right.
that our bodies have just always been exposed to. So there's, like, because there's this idea in with the FDA that if there's no bad stuff on it, like if they haven't done a study and showed that it's bad, then it must be just be okay.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, they're changing a lot with the FDA recently with RFK and stuff, but
Hmm.
that's always been the tradition in the FDA is like, if there's no studies that show it's bad, like Red 40, right? I talk about this in my book. They did a poll with scientists. They asked a number of experts, have we done enough studies on red food coloring to show that it's safe? 96% of them said no, we have not done enough studies, but they still just declared that it was safe. They didn't care. Even though,
Yeah.
like, so they just assume it's safe until it's proven to be terrible. And then they pull it from the market, or like that's what they're doing with Red 40 right now,
Yep.
right? So for individual people, I suggest going the opposite. I would assume it's terrible unless you've seen a lot of clear studies that it does not mimic hormones, it does not cause toxicity. Those would be the things.
Yeah, you have to have some burden of skepticism and also this I would say a little bit of apprehension on everything out there that's so new because we don't understand it. The only thing we could say we understand is that it seems we're getting sicker and sicker. Or not
Yep.
even it seems. I mean, the
Good point.
latest stats is what, 76% chronically ill. That's insane. Like, at
Yep.
this rate with everything, it's going to be a very rare thing for someone to be truly healthy, let's say in their 40s or 50s, right?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
that's the way we're going, then maybe we should be a little bit more skeptical of everything we're including now or placing in or on our bodies.
Yeah. Like, have you heard of a peel? The thing they're coating
Yeah, yeah. I
apples
remember
with the.
years ago seeing them and they're being applauded, right, at this big food with Mark
Mhm.
Hyman and others. And I was like, I don't know, that
Mhm.
seems a little sketchy, right? Now people
Exactly.
are starting to
It's a
feel
good
that.
example, right? It's a good example because they won't tell you what's in it. It's a
Yep.
coating they're putting on apples and bananas or whatever. They're putting it on foods and they're saying it's safe and all this stuff. And of course, Bill Gates is the main funder of this
Yeah.
stuff and everybody.
That's always a red flag. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, exactly. Like he's done enough experimenting on children in different countries to raise red flags. But the fact that they won't reveal what the thing is made out of initially, like what's in it, they wouldn't even tell you. They just said, "Oh, it's okay. The FDA says it's safe." It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's not enough, right? That's a good example. You can't just assume these things are safe because the FDA says it's okay. There's a lot of things that need more transparency here.
And we're just going to see that more and more with the advent of just chemicals coming out all the time, the speed of everything going through AI to quicken it
Yep.
up and create other things. I just think we're going to see it more. And I think there needs to be the counter pendulum swing to, hey, let's be more natural. Let's get a
Mm-hmm.
commune going. Let's grow our own gardens, right?
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah. I
let's
grew up
do
mine.
things that are completely against that to kind of protect ourselves. And luckily,
Yeah.
you're seeing some of that. I know you're a big fan of just being in nature and going
Yep.
back to the ways how we've done things forever, where we were healthier.
Exactly. And it's hard. I mean, I homeschool. I go like the extra 10 miles, I don't just go the
I
extra
get
mile.
it. Yeah.
But there's a huge homeschooling group where I live. It's awesome. It's super social, much better, healthier social life too, instead of
Hmm.
everybody being in the same age categories, interacting with each other. But yeah, it's hard. It's everybody's situation is unique, but people can make improvements all the time, so just keep improving, keep going in the right directions.
For
Hopefully this
sure.
helps. Hopefully this raises a lot of awareness for people where they weren't even thinking about this before.
I think so. And I do think I want to hear your thoughts on the administration, Bobby Kennedy,
Mm,
and how they're doing, because I see it on social media that it's not enough and they have to do more. And we're still putting, big people in the top that are very pro vaccine or this or whatever, or pro pharma. What are
yeah.
your thoughts first? I won't even jump in on mine.
Yeah, way better than was 10
Way.
years ago.
Yeah.
Like 100% better than Fauci and the gang,
Yeah.
Francis Collins and all those people. I'm super familiar because I used to write grants. I used to get grant funding. I've published peer-reviewed journals. I know how it goes. I know how it went. I know how it's going. But yeah, there's some broken promises. Like anybody who forced vaccines on people, flu shots and COVID vaccines, anybody who forced vaccines should not be, being promoted into positions, and they are being promoted. So there's some
Yeah.
some definitely some question marks, but still way better. I'm still very
Yeah.
positive because the culture is waking up. I mean, the reason RFK exists is because the pendulum had swung so far in the other direction. That's a good thing. I mean, we needed people to come out and say fluoride is super toxic. Did you know the government, the HHS, Robert Kennedy is in charge of the
Correct.
HHS, Health and Human
Yeah.
Services. Um, the HHS is being sued right now because they did 55 studies before RFK came along. They did 55 studies, and 53 of them showed that fluoride is neurotoxic at every dose.
Wow.
There was zero safe doses,
Oh,
all right, for your brain toxicity. And they hid the data from the public. That's why they're being sued, is because they hid the
yeah.
data. It wasn't because because fluoride is so bad or so good or whatever.
Right.
It's because they didn't tell the public about it. That's the kind of nonsense. And again, that happened before RFK came into charge. That kind of nonsense, it's inexcusable. Like we have to get rid of people that are that are involved in that kind of shenanigans, hiding data from the public just because it doesn't fit some kind of narrative. That's insane.
Right. And
And
that's going on everywhere, right? It's
yeah,
not just
vaccines.
fluoride, it's so
Yeah,
many other elements. I mean, I know there's a push away from mercury and amalgam fillings, but we're still using it. And why? Because I think they have to inch away from the lawsuits. If
yep,
ever
yep,
there was
yep.
a like,
Yes.
oops, sorry for the
Yep,
last 50 years of putting this,
yep,
insanely toxic neurotoxin in your mouth, which
yep.
obviously
Leeches.
vapors in and raises
Yep, yep,
levels. That
yep,
would be an admission of guilt. So they have to sort of inch slowly and be like, don't look this way. Everything's
yep,
fine.
yep.
And
I know.
hope, in a certain amount of years, it's like, oh, that was terrible what we did back then.
I know, man. Like the lead paint and the lead gasoline.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least there's hope. I mean, again, I think it's going in the right direction. I hope it keeps
Yeah.
going in the right direction. And I hope, it's frustrating. I mean, the best we can do is just talk about it, get YouTube videos out, raise awareness. Individual people need to follow the correct people and ignore the people that, were on the wrong side of this to begin with, the unethical crowd that's hiding
Yes.
data and doing all this nonsense.
Yeah, yeah, and I think over time, more and more will come into the light. Truth will come out, and I hope
Mhm.
that is enough to get people to see things differently and start to
Yeah.
really care about their health with the right information in front of them. I got
Yeah.
one more question for you because I had a bunch here, and I don't want to take up too
Hmm.
much of your time. But this is from a past podcast guest, so I got to get to it. Here is any
Hmm.
info Dr. J can provide on the link of dropping estrogen levels and histamine reactions.
Oh, sure. So dropping estrogen and histamine, two different things, but histamine comes from the word amino acid. So it's actually broken down amino acids. So if you're eating like aged meat or fermented foods or whatever, those are often triggering histamines.
Mhm.
So if you have great histamine genes, no problem. But if you have a lot of histamine sensitivity and a lot of problematic histamine genetics, you want to be careful with fermented foods, aged foods, canned tuna, stuff that's sitting around a long time that has a lot of protein because it comes from the proteins. Um, and the major histamine gene is called amine oxidase copper containing. Hear the word copper there. It's called AOC, just like the politician AOC. You can look it up later. It's AOC1, AOC number one. If you look up AOC, you're just going to find a bunch of nonsense about this
Yeah, you won't
politician that
find
made a ton of money. She
that.
used to work
Put
at
a
a
one
bar.
at
Now
the
she's like
end.
a 15 million net value. but
Right.
but the AOC gene is called AOC1. It's got copper in it. It depends on copper for flushing histamines, and most people don't have that much copper in your diet. It comes from liver. Like if you eat liver, you're getting a lot of copper. Nobody's eating liver,
No,
right?
no.
But it can help you if you have histamine problems. It helps to boost your copper. It might also help if you take some kidney supplements because kidney, like desiccated kidney, it has diamine oxidase, DAO or DOA. I'm sorry, DOA, which is an enzyme that helps flush out histamine. So there's two things you could do: take copper or eat liver, which has copper. Get copper because that helps your genetic clearance, and then get that kidney. That those would be the two things besides just avoidance of foods that have a lot of histamines.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really appreciate this whole conversation. It was really important to learn more. I think more people need to read your book, Estrogeneration. Where can people connect with you, get your services? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, just search my name on YouTube, and then of course AJ Consulting Company is my DNA consulting company. It's called ajconsultingcompany.com. Super terrible URL name, but it came up with it in
No, nowadays
2010
you
and
need it to
I'm
be
stuck.
exactly what you do, right? It's like
Yeah,
they
I'm
say
stuck.
best Chinese restaurant is like the best URL ever as a name of like a place. They'll just show
It's
up
true.
every
It's
time.
true. Yeah, I got kind of like shoehorned into making a website in 2010 quick, and it just like, okay, just call it AJ Consulting Company.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But that's what it is for genetic consulting, like 23andMe or Ancestry.com data, and then people can look it up and read about it, and then just YouTube. Check me out on YouTube. I do
Yeah.
videos. I put in a lot of work. It's free to watch it if you're interested in a certain topic.
It's great work. I love everything you put out there. So happy we got to connect and have you on
Thanks.
here. Thank you again.
Thanks,
And be
Kelsey.
sure to visit Dr. J's website, as he said, ajconsultingcompany.com. We're going to include all the links to social media in our show notes. And until next time, keep writing your own healing story.